so that you can grow, because everybody wants a double or a triple. They want to, like any business owner you talk to, even like individual, they want to either double their income or triple their income. Like we're coming up on the end of the year, guaranteed everybody's goals for next year is twice as much money or 3 times the revenue. That's always the case. People are never satisfied with where they're at, and they throw out these numbers. And so I look at it like you've got a single story house and people want to stack a second and a third story on top of it. But before we can do that, we have to check the foundation to make sure it can support it. And so that's how I view operations. It's like this necessary evil, because operations isn't a sexy sell. It's really hard to measure ROI, but it's checking the foundation to make sure that we can support stacking marketing and sales on top of our single story house to make it a 3-story house.
Welcome back to another episode of The Pursuit of Purpose. My name is Chris Kiefer, and today I am here with Ian Bishop, who is the Rev Ops coach and the founder of Ops Academy. I'm really excited for this conversation. We've got a number of overlapping, friends and professional network. So I've heard a lot about you, Ian. We actually, I believe one of your clients, I'm spacing on his name. He's on the East Coast. He was on our podcast, and he was the one that introduced me first. He's the Burr guy.
Mike Ketchen?
Ketchen, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he was on, and he recommended you. And then Anthony Walker, a good friend of mine, knows you. And then you're collaborating with Levi Gurno. But so many different connections, and everyone has continued to rave about your ability to do operations and whatnot. So thank you so much for coming on, first of all. And I'm excited for this.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for having me. I mean, it was funny even just talking earlier of I think when we put this on the calendar, it wasn't until after that we made the Levi connection.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Coeur d'Alene seems kind of like Maui, where it's like small community, everybody knows everybody, especially if you're doing something.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and there's a few of those like mastermind groups that you get into, and you're like one connection away from 100 other people that, are super valuable for you to get to know. Yeah. So I want to start out with Rev Ops. I think that's it's a newer term. I've heard that in my past job before I went out on my own. One of the conversations that I was having with the owners of that company was I was the marketing director and trying to synchronize sales and marketing together. And that's my understanding, is that Rev Ops is like a cohesiveness between sales and marketing. Is that correct? Or how do you like to tell people what that is?
Yeah, that's how I think of it, is like there has to be autonomy, I think, today between your marketing and your sales. Whereas I think back in the day, or even still now, a lot of people split the two, and that lack of cohesiveness, I think a lot of times causes your head of marketing and your head of sales to do this when they aren't getting the results that they want. And so I think you have to have somebody that helps create that autonomy, from A to Z, where you get true attribution and you can really focus on the end goal of converting a customer and getting those parties to work together. But I think as you're doing that, there's a lot of times a lack of like systems and efficiency in how we do that. And sometimes it's just personality based, right? Like a really good marketer is like head down in the weeds, in the trenches of their ads manager, their campaigns, all that. A really good salesperson is leaving chaos in their dust, and they're not super organized, right? And so sometimes just personality types, you end up not having a ton of efficiency. And so with my background, I was in a sales industry, started taking over all the marketing for the business, and really just kind of saw this opportunity, started doing more and more of it. And it wasn't until somebody actually told me, they were like, well, have you ever heard of, the first stage was I didn't even know what a COO was. And I was like, what does that do? And they're like, they do what you just described you do. And I was like, oh, okay. And then the next iteration of that was somebody introduced me to the term CRO, Chief Revenue Officer. And I was like, well, what does that do? And they tell me what they did. And I was like, oh, that's what I do. I'm like, and I came from automotive, and automotive doesn't really care about titles so much. It's a little more old school, where you have like GSM, GM, that kind of thing. And so you don't have kind of that corporate structure with titles. And these are all new things to me, but I was like, oh, this is really what's needed. And so then as I started doing consulting, I recognized this is what's lacking. There's a lack of cohesiveness between sales and marketing, and there's nobody paying attention to the operational side of the business to try to make it more efficient as it grows. And
Mm.
so that's where I kind of stumbled into that. And I found that amongst my peers when it came to operations, so I've got a background in EOS. So I'm a certified integrator. I've gone through the implementer course as well. And what I found was amongst my peers, they were all doing like operations for the sake of operations. And having come up through automotive and been a GM for almost 10 years, I was like, we only did operations in order to drive revenue. We weren't doing operations for the sake of operations. We were doing it to help grow the business. And I think a lot of my peers were losing sight of that or had never done that themselves. And so it started to become something that just kind of set me apart, where it was like, yeah, we're going to do this, but we're going to do it because of the revenue. And so it just kind of became that unique quality for me where it's like, man, I can speak both languages and I understand the why behind why we're going to do this.
And so you mentioned efficiency several times, which is interesting to me. What's the because what we do at Boolean, we're like this crazy niche that I never would have like I couldn't have crafted it. It just kind of happened. But we do automating of all business processes for painting companies. So residential and commercial painting companies across the country, we
Okay.
come in and literally like probably 80% of the data entry, paperwork, and just like the processes that are manually managed by staff, like 80% can be obliterated if you set up the software and the integrations and automations correctly to have data flowing seamlessly between the different apps that companies use. So that's where I feel like because I call Boolean a consulting and an automation consulting and implementation company because you hire us to come in and like overhaul all your systems and train your staff. But the one thing that we don't do is like the management or like the like we're not there's coaching groups that work with the people. We're like systems, and then we'll train you on how to do them, but we have to work in collaboration with a company that either already has um, a good like coaching or framework for like leadership development and stuff like that, because that's a critical piece. But we come in and just like hone in all the systems and eliminate all the waste. I like to think of it as like some of the clients that we talk to, I would say that they are literally like bleeding from the neck in waste and just inefficiency, or like their overhead is crushing them, and they don't need nearly the number of people in the office that they have. They just have never leveraged technology in the right way. So that's my lens is coming in at this. So I'm curious with with everything that you're saying, what is the like how does efficiency, because you said like as you grow you want to become more efficient. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, when I first got started, people would reach out to me for help with marketing. And I had this like Groundhog's Day where every single meeting would go the same way. 30 minutes in, looking at all their data, we'd go, yeah, I don't think you need help with marketing. You need help with sales. Like your funnel isn't converting. You don't have a process. Your people aren't saying the same thing every time. It's not repeatable, which makes it harder to onboard and train somebody. And they would always say, well, can you help with that? And I was like, yeah, that's actually the thing I'm better at. Um, and so I kind of stumbled into that. And I think a lot of people just overlook that efficiency piece. Like one of the number one pieces of feedback I get from clients is, and now I've started focusing on it, is like, I help make sure that we're solving the right problem and not the wrong problem. Because I think sometimes a lot of entrepreneurs, especially, are so quick to try to come up with solutions that sometimes they've misdiagnosed the problem or maybe the root cause of the
Mm.
problem. And they're coming up with solutions to the wrong thing. And then it doesn't work. And they get frustrated and they just do the same thing again or a little bit different. It's like, man, we've never actually addressed why this is happening in the first place. And so within my company, Ops Academy, we work primarily with like COOs, directors of operation, to help accelerate their learning curve, but also build the playbooks for the business at the same time. And so
Mm.
The analogy I use is if you look at like Formula One, you've got like the team principal. He is the visionary, right? He's the guy that says, hey, this is our strategy. We're going to be the fastest in the corners. And this is part of a 4-step process that I see happen over and over in business, where that person, the visionary, they're going to do the vision, right? Fairly obvious. But then what happens is like they like to dabble in some of the macro like strategy. And that's where they then hand it off to that designer, right? The chief designer is the guy who's going to actually build the race car to execute on what that visionary wants to have happen. And so he's going to dig into the details of like the micro strategy. And really what he's answering is that question of how. And so he's digging into the details of here's exactly how we're going to execute that. But at this point, everything's still just in our heads. And so there comes this inflection point where we have to take the unseen and make it real, like put a shovel in the ground and have something to show for it. And this is usually that same guy, right? That chief designer is going to have his team start to build the race car. And this is that implementation phase. And so when you're going through implementation, you're building the race car, but there also is then going to be a handoff to the race car driver. And so a lot of businesses have a business owner and they have the race car driver, but they've never actually built the race car. And so the owner is sending that operator out onto the racetrack in a go-kart and expecting him to win races. And so in Ops Academy, what we do is we come alongside the operator to help them build the playbooks, to build the race car with buy-in from the operator, because I got to know how far back do I need to put the seat? Do you know what all the buttons on the steering wheel do? Right.
Yep.
And people support that which they help to create. And so if you get buy-in from them as you're doing it, a lot higher likelihood of success that it's actually going to work. And from the owner's perspective, if they have the wrong operator, because a lot of conversations I have with business owners is like they hire an operator prematurely and they don't give them a playbook. They hire somebody they know, like, and trust, but who doesn't have industry knowledge and doesn't have business knowledge. And so they want to accelerate their learning curve, but the conversation always goes the same way where they're like, this guy got me this far, but I don't know if they're the guy to take me to the next level. And so they're almost contemplating like replacing this person that they really like and trust. But the real problem to solve is how do we accelerate their learning curve? And so I believe that if a 17-year-old kid told his guidance counselor, I want to become a COO, they'd have no idea what career path, what training, what schooling, like what trajectory to put them on. Whereas if you look at your C-suite, like your CEO, it's fairly obvious whether they go the traditional route, like, get an MBA, that kind of thing, or they're just a like born and bred entrepreneur. Like it's pretty obvious how they end up in that CEO seat. Your CFO, again, clear track. You go to school, get an accounting degree, CPA, smaller company, bigger company, you keep working your way up. When it comes to COO, there's no learning track. And so our goal is how do we accelerate the learning curve of the COO and build the playbooks at the same time? Because in the rare instance that you do have the wrong person, at least you've started to build the playbooks so that you have a race car to hand off to the next person that comes in.
Yeah, there's a couple things there. When there's no weigh-in, there's no buy-in. And the other thing, I use the analogy of the race car as well. And I say that what we do at Boolean is we build we literally legitimately in the painting industry specifically, we can build the race car in a better, more customized way for your business because we only work with painters and we've worked with 16 different painting companies across the country. And these are like large engagements that were, take 6 months or 9 months to implement. And we have a roadmap and a blueprint and everything. But if you, first of all, last thing you want is to pay for the Ferrari and then have it rust in your driveway because you guys don't know how to use it, or you don't even have a driver for it. So so many good analogies I love some additional context that you put in there. So that's, you guys are built, when you say building playbooks, is that like, in my mind always jumps to software like Trainual or tools like that? Or are these like, are you a fan of Google Docs? Like, cause I think sometimes people get caught up in like, what does a playbook look like? And the reality, in my opinion, is like, it's like a checklist of things, and don't overthink it. Like, use the tools that you have in front of you, but there are softwares that do it well or better than just like a Google Doc. But I have seen companies that have a bunch of Google Docs that work great, So what's the specific way that you manage, or what do you define as a playbook?
Yeah, so I have a background in EOS, and so I use a lot of that as like the building blocks. And probably similar to you, where the way you described the painting industry, I kind of stumbled into the real estate investing community as a niche that worked really well with what I offered. Um, and essentially, most real estate investors get into the business for the lifestyle. And as the business starts to grow, it starts to impede their lifestyle. And so they become very aware that they have a problem. They have a problem they definitely want to solve. And if they've had any success in investing in real estate, they can afford to solve it. And so it's kind of this perfect like trifecta where I had a client one time who said, like, I'm a great real estate investor. I'm still learning how to become a good business owner. And I think that's where I come in and supplement and help a lot, is going, hey, these are the business principles that we need to implement. So I use a lot of EOS like fundamentals in that. So what I like to do is start with your people, it's like you yourself as the leader, your people, your roster. Who do we have currently? We go through a process audit. It's like, what is our fundamental or core process that works? Do we have a repeatable way to acquire new business? Do we have a repeatable way to follow up with them, to close them, to onboard new clients, and then to keep them and get them to spend more with us? Right.
Mm.
And so we go through
And
that.
those are the aspects of revenue operations.
Yeah, right. Because
Yeah.
that's essentially where the dollars are going to come from, and what levers can we pull to increase
Yep.
revenue? It's either more customers or higher paying customers, right?
Right.
And so when it comes to going down a line to say, how do we reduce the expenses? Well, how do we reduce the cost of acquisition? We just sell to the people we've already sold to before, and then we sell an upsell or a downsell, but we get them to spend more money with us in the future to increase lifetime value.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we use the background in that to start building out what we call the playbooks. And then we go through an org chart, a future org chart, so we can start mapping, like, what does this look like to grow the company on purpose, so that we're not building a company that has higher revenue but lower profit. And I think that's a
Mm.
trap a lot of people fall into. Um, and so we go through the process audit, people audit. We start to build it out to where there's a plan, so that we know what growth looks like. We know what strategic growth looks like, and we know what overly ambitious, foolish growth might look like.
Mm.
Um, and then as we go through that, we implement scorecards, metrics. How do we measure people to know that we're making progress? And then how do we actually run meetings that are effective for execution and not just for communication? A lot of people will have meetings because they have poor communication. We really focus on how do we run effective meetings that drives execution, so that we continue to make progress and hold people accountable, and that we're measuring us against us, and we're creating a format where we can come alongside somebody to help remove the roadblocks and address the root issues that are holding us back from more growth.
Mm. Love that. So, what would you say uh, my mind goes into, as a owner, something that I know this is a struggle for me, um, delegating versus dispatching. I think I saw you describe those two differently. That to me seems like a really core thing, of like a guy that you just referenced that said, I'm a good investor, but I'm learning how to be a better owner. I think that being a really good business owner is someone that is very, I mean, a good leader, but effective when it comes to delegating responsibilities to the people. So what tactics or strategies or frameworks do you like to introduce to help with that?
Yeah, so I think people confuse those two a lot. I think delegating is a really popular like buzzword right now, and I think people have lost sight of what dispatching looks like. And so I look at dispatching like, if you've read the book Who Not How, Dan Sullivan, the idea is, how do I get this work to the specialist, to the person that is better at doing this than I am, right? That would be dispatching. It also comes up when you have like proportional task to talent, right? So in automotive, we would dispatch jobs to the appropriate mechanic. So if I've got an OEM certified mechanic, he's going to do the transmission job. And if I have a lube tech, he's going to do the oil change, right? And I'm not going to
Mm.
flip those, right? So the task matches the payroll essentially. That's more of what dispatching is who, not how. Delegating is saying, hey, what's the best use of my time? What's the highest ROI? And how do I start taking the lowest ROI tasks and handing them off to someone else to where I can then be freed up to do more of what I'm better at? So with the buyback principle, which is Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time, one of the big things that people overlook is you should not buy back your time until you know what you're going to do with it. And so once you can identify, if I had this time freed up, I would be doing this, then you can buy it back. And this also works with employees. So a great example is like, if you've got multiple employees who can show you objectively from like, and we talk about it in terms of capacity, man, these are my highest ROI activities that generate revenue for the business. These are the things that only I can do. And the goal is to either generate revenue with the things that only you can do, or create the training with the things that only you can do. So we use the term no black boxes. Like that's a very old school mentality of like job security. And so we want information shared so that other people can do that. And now if you can show me where if I had this time back, I could use it more effectively over here to generate revenue. The example comes in where if you say I have, easy numbers, say you've got 4 employees who can show you objectively, man, I've got 10 hours worth of stuff I do every week that someone else could do. I've already created the how-to. I'm a big fan of Loom, right? Use Loom, create the how-to, put it in a simple spreadsheet. I've already created the how-to where someone else could be doing this. And if they did, I would be doing this. Now, as a business owner, I can just make the like arbitrage decision to be able to say, well, if I've got 4 people that I could free up 10 hours from each, that's enough for me to go out and hire maybe it's an admin who, they're not necessarily an EA, but they're an admin for the department. And they're going to work 40 hours per week. And that takes 10 hours from each one of these people who can now be more effective with that time. And so to me, that's delegating.
Do you like figuring out who can do the task, or like it's a bunch of repetitive tasks?
Yeah, you're just shaving off the lowest ROI activities constantly.
Yeah. And dispatching would be a layer above that where someone's coming in and trying to essentially facilitate the act of delegating potentially. Mm-hmm. That's dispatching.
Yeah, as new business is coming in, right? Like great example with whether it's investor relations or sales, there's a difference between our most recent inquiry and our most valuable inquiry, right? So a customer that comes from this lead source statistically is a higher profit customer or a bigger dollar investor. And so I want to prioritize that differently than just the most recent. But a lot of times what happens is people develop a system just based on the most recent, and it gets round robined or whatever. And they're not saying like, hey, this salesperson I have or this investor relations guy I have does the best with these kind of clients, and this guy does the best with these kind. Or I've got a few that I'm not really sure yet. And so those are the guys I'll round robin to. Right. And so again, from an efficiency standpoint, we're just trying to match talent to task.
Yeah. So you're in the real estate and investing. Is that like, is that the industry that you work in? So like if a painting company or any company came to you and said, hey, I want help, do you, are there any industries that you don't work in, or do you lean towards like, yeah, I prefer real estate, or I'm faster in real estate, but like you work with all businesses? Where is the line for you on the ideal client?
When I first started doing consulting, where I was just doing one-to-one years ago, when I had a marketing company and I started kind of dipping my foot in to see like, oh, could I do this? I started realizing like, man, I know a whole lot more about this than I thought I did. And like, this is so needed in other industries. And so, I had a client, it was in e-commerce, and I was like, I don't do e-com. I can't help you. And then we sat down for just like an intro call, and it was like, oh, there is so much low hanging fruit here that I can help you with that I did not realize I knew, or like that you didn't know. So to answer your question, like, yeah, we'll work with any type of business. Typically, if it's a scenario where the owner has an operator and there's usually more than 8 employees, that tends to be like the sweet spot, because that's when you're really starting to hit a ceiling and you need the help with it. Versus I also have clients that are just really trying to be proactive, or they're trying to get themselves out of the business. And so they need help with it on a smaller scale, and there may only be 2, 3 employees. But usually what I find is there's kind of like these two stair steps. When you've got 2 to 3 employees, everybody's still an expense. Nobody's helping you generate revenue yet. And once you get to like 10, 12, 15, somewhere in that range, depending on the business, is when you hit the next roadblock where it's like, I can't manage more people than this one-to-one. And so you don't have any managers or leadership in the business. And so you have to break through that. But what's cool is once you do, like the systems and the processes that work with 25 employees also work with 125. And so what I find a lot of times is guys have to break through almost, sometimes it's like a limiting belief or it's just a structures thing when they've got 2 to 3 employees. And then again, when they've got, 10 or 12. And so we primarily specialize when you're starting to hit that pain point at like 10 to 12, because we focus a lot on leadership development. That was what we found with EOS, why we started kind of customizing it and steering away from it was it wasn't, I wouldn't even say robust. There was hardly anything regarding leadership development. There was hardly anything regarding conversion or like sales cycles, and not a ton on project management. It's really based on like a cyclical software type business. And so what I had known over my career was that conversion or selling cycles, leadership development, and project management were like 3 of the biggest levers that helped us grow. And so that's really what we kind of specialize in within Ops Academy, is going, okay, how do we create the building blocks with these other major areas of focus so that you can grow? Because everybody wants a double or a triple. They want to, like any business owner you talk to, even like individual, they want to either double their income or triple their income. Like we're coming up on the end of the year, guaranteed everybody's goals for next year is twice as much money or 3 times the revenue. Like that's always the case. People are never satisfied with where they're at. And they throw out these numbers. And so I look at it like you've got a single story house and people want to stack a second and a third story on top of it. But before we can do that, we have to check the foundation to make sure it can support it. And so that's how I view operations. It's like this necessary evil, because operations isn't a sexy sell. It's really hard to measure ROI, but it's checking the foundation to make sure that we can support stacking marketing and sales on top of our single story house to make it a 3-story house.
Yeah. And I would say, I sometimes tell people similar analogy that you like the house that I lived in, or let's say my home when I was in college or when I was in high school was different than when I was in college, and it was different than right after I graduated. And I moved again when we got married, and then we had kids, and then more kids. And the ideal house for me at any one of those stages evolved, right? Like it was actually perfect for me to live in a dorm room my freshman year of college because I was trying to get to know people, right? That would be a ridiculous place for me to stay with kids, or and you're married. And same thing, like I now have an acre of land with like a big play set in the back and stuff. That would have been silly for me to have when I was in college or right after college. Like I wanted to be close to downtown and be able to hit the nightlife or whatever it is. And so I feel like sometimes people come in and they think that they like made a mistake, that they have the wrong systems or the wrong processes, or they picked the wrong tech stack. And the reality is like, no, you made the right decision for the time, like the life cycle of your business. Now we just need to move you to the appropriate thing. And sometimes, again, expanding on that analogy, you have to realize like, oh, I'm living in a condo right now, and I need to move to like maybe outside of the city a little bit and get some land. And you know what I mean? Like you could be in a structure that is just not the structure that you need. And so it's essentially wipe it out and rebuild.
Yeah.
But it's exactly the same principles as like, let's look at the foundation and what you have and see, is it capable of stacking more on top? Or do we need to build support and then stack, or knock it down, start over, or just move to a totally different place?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'll give you a great example. I had a client who was in real estate, single family investor, had built up a pretty sizable portfolio. I think it was around 70, 80 single family homes. But he self-admittedly said, like, I was the cog in that business. Like I was so entrenched in the weeds. I knew everything about it. He started a new company where he hired an operator. It was in an industry that was a little bit out of his comfort zone, but had a lot of opportunity. And what the way he said it to me was, I don't have my foot on the gas, but I don't have my foot on the brake either. I'm just kind of hovering. And what I assessed was, in his previous business in real estate, he was so entrenched in the weeds that he could rely on his gut to make decisions. And in this new business where he was not involved, didn't have the intention to be involved, he didn't know how to make decisions based off of data. And so he was having to relearn how to run the business because he had done it completely different before, where he had done everything himself, knew how to make decisions based off his intuition because of the experience. He knew all the details of what was happening. In the new business, he's sitting more in that true visionary owner seat, and he doesn't know how to make decisions or trust the data or verify the data to know, yeah, this is what we should do next. This is where we need a pause. This is where we need a new strategy. And so he's having to relearn how to run the business that way and how to make decisions based off of data. And so that's a huge like shift we see a lot of times when people go from, even if it's not two separate businesses, even if it's the same one, where they go from, hey, I'm super involved, to now I'm getting metrics and KPIs from my team. What do I do with this information? How do I use it to make decisions?
Love that. What are the different ways that, so you mentioned or you said we a couple times, and then you mentioned Ops Academy. You obviously do one-on-one consulting. What are the different like ways that people can say, hey, Ian, I want to work with you? And like, I think you have a mastermind event. But yeah, just walk through like, these are, I don't know, in my mind, I'm starting to piece together like tiers of engagement or something, or different like segments of your clients. But what are those services or offerings that you have?
Yeah. So Ops Academy is my main business, where we work primarily with owners and operators. And really the focus is on the operator. And that's that one where we come alongside them to accelerate their learning curve and then help them build the business playbooks and the operating systems at the same time.
And what does that look like? Is it like learning modules and weekly calls or group coaching, or what's
Yep.
the?
Yeah, a combination of. So we do some one-on-ones in there, because a lot of times what happened is, honestly, the business owner hires me and then plugs me in with their operator. And this is, case by case. Some guys are, what the heck are you doing here? What do I need you for? And they don't realize their own blind spots. And then some guys are very excited and they're like, oh man, I can't wait to start. And everybody has a different jumping off point. Some people have no business experience, or maybe they have no industry experience. And so we're kind of assessing, hey, where do they need the most help to catch up? So we do some one-on-one, more like executive coaching with them in the beginning. And then, just like you said, we do implementation calls, leadership development calls. Those are on a weekly cadence. And then we do some behind the scenes interviews with other operators. So I just had a good buddy of mine that has 2 Chick-fil-A's in San Diego. And so we did an interview with him saying, how do you run multiple 7-figure businesses with teenagers? You got to have some pretty good systems and processes to be able to do that.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what that engagement looks like. It's typically anywhere between 6 months to a year, right? Because it's not overnight that you can accelerate somebody's learning curve and build out those playbooks.
And is this you and who else? How many other coaches?
Yeah, so I've got 2 employees in that business, and then sometimes we'll cycle in a new coach to help with a specialty. So like right now, I'm looking at bringing in a guy for specifically just process audit, who was a quality engineer, and so his brain just works that way, where he's looking for all the little inefficiencies and details, as well as a buddy of mine that's a CFO consultant. So having him come on staff as like a quarterly coach as well, because I don't think that's something. I need my guys to be dangerous enough to understand the financials, but I don't need them to be able to be doing journal entries.
Yeah.
And then I have a leadership development coach on staff who's a great guy, Andrew. He's got every credential under the sun. So he's Story Brand, John Maxwell, Patterson Life Plan, DISC, Working Genius, Culture Index, like you name it, he's got it. And so he focuses a lot on the leadership side when it comes to like self-awareness and alignment on the team, alignment between the owner and the operator. And you're really helping them kind of develop the soft skills as a leader and helping them navigate some of those situations where it's like, hey, what do I do when I had an employee that I gave this task to and they just like blatantly didn't do it? And so he helps kind of walk them through some of those scenarios and kind of coach them through it. And then we do the implementation calls each week, which is really designed for them to build out the operating system for the business. And then so within that company, we have a specific cohort for real estate investors, because slightly different. A lot of the stuff's the same because, again, we don't teach real estate investing, we teach business. And so within the real estate investing community, though, a lot of guys are still owner operated. Like they're still doing it all themselves. And so we just had to make a choice where it's like, man, do we exclude those people that need that help to get out of the seat themselves? Or do we allow those people in? Because Ops Academy originally was designed as like a COO club. It's like operators only, no owners allowed kind of thing. But within real estate investing, it's so common that you have the owner still operating. And so those cohorts of real estate investors can also be owner operators. And we essentially do a lot of the same stuff, just we get a little more specific to real estate. So we focus on raising capital, acquisitions, construction or development, and then property management.
So that's the Ops Academy. And then you were going to go into the other arms.
Yeah. So the REI Boss is the cohorts of real estate investors within Ops Academy. So it's like one parent company.
Got it.
That is, it's like an umbrella of those branches.
Awesome. And then tell me about the mastermind that's coming up.
Yeah. So doing an owner operator event, because what I found was a lot of business owners think they're really clear and they think that their team is on the same page. And they think they're really good at communicating the vision, but oftentimes the results show otherwise. And so when it comes to doing like their year-end planning or like their annual offsite, they can do some of that in doses, but they really don't want to sit down for like 2 or 3 days and get all bogged down in the weeds. But operators do want to do that. And so what I did was I created an event for owners and operators that's kind of a hybrid between a mastermind and your annual offsite. So the idea is that owner and operator comes out together, and we kind of focus on 3 pieces. The first one is alignment between the owner and the operator. The second piece is strategy. But when we do the strategy, we split the group to where owners go with owners, operators go with operators. And so we're able to do the strategy separately amongst peers. Because what I find is a lot of time the owner would much rather mastermind with other entrepreneurs, visionaries, and dream, right? And not get bogged down in the weeds. The operators would rather get really tactical and bogged down in the weeds. So we do those separately. And then we come back together to make sure that we have alignment, we're staying on the same page. And then the third piece is really just clarity on our plan of attack going into 2025. And so it's a 2.5-day event where those are kind of the 3 phases that we're going to take people through here in Maui. And so we're almost full. I think we've got 2 spots left, but that's beginning of January 8th to the 11th, again, here in Maui. And so that's designed for owners and operators. It's going to be awesome. I don't know anybody else who's doing something like that. There's groups that do operators only. There's groups that do owners only, but I've never seen the 2 mixed together. And so I've gotten a lot of good feedback of this sounds awesome. And from the owner's perspective, it's like, yeah, this is exactly what I want. I want someone to help this meeting go well for their annual offsite. But I also I want to be around other owners. And the other piece is I want my operator to be around other strong operators. And so it's like, how do I force him to come with me to an event like this and get him in the room with other people that look like him to where they're able to collaborate and strategize and problem solve. So
that's awesome. Looking at the time here, I want to make sure we have time for the wrap up questions. What are 3 book recommendations that you have for us?
Man, number 1 is probably Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Like that book was so revolutionary for me. Like I feel like Dan speaks my language. Like everything he says just resonates. I'm like, yes, that's what I've been trying to say. Like you put better words to this than I do. And so that's one that I recommend to people all the time where it's like, have you read this? Okay, read it and then come back to me. Yes. Yeah. And I've had,
we're in Dan's SaaS Academy.
Oh, okay.
And I'm also in Dan Martell's fitness and health group or coaching group. Oh, you are too?
Yeah.
How's that going? How long have you been in it?
Just a month. Yeah.
Okay, so you got done with the cleanse and stuff?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm 100 days in, I think, or 99. I need to check my app. But yeah, with Coach Allen and whatnot. So I've lost 27 pounds, and I'm at like 11% body fat now, and I'm almost to the recomp phase. But
Okay.
it's like, I don't know about you, but I hesitated. I saw it and I was like, I don't know. And then I sat on it for like 3 months before being like, my wife was like, why don't you just do it? Like, you're eventually going to do it. Like, what are you waiting to do? And so I did. And yeah, it's been the thing for me that was game changing was just the plan. It's just
Yeah.
such an obvious
Yeah. It's easy to execute.
microcosm for anything. Like, I'm disciplined, like I work out, I've done CrossFit for 8 years, and I just had a dad bod. Like, I was just frustrated and I wasn't eating well. I didn't know what to eat. And to go to a group that's like, do these workouts, eat this food, you'll look like this. And I was like, all right, done. Like
Yeah.
that,
I'm just going
thinking
to trust the
over.
process.
Yeah, it was amazing. And it's still, I mean, yeah, so it's been unbelievable.
Yep. Yeah. Yes. Similar experience where I love the monotony of it, where
Mm-hmm.
it's just, I don't have to think about it. And I've talked to a few people even in the group, and I'm super fortunate where I just gave my wife the meal plan. And so she just makes it at the appropriate time of day to where like food is hot and ready. If I'm hungry, like that's what I'm going to eat. I don't have to face any kind of like decision fatigue of going
Yep.
like, ooh, or I don't have to be tempted opening the fridge. It's just
Yep.
like, oh, food's ready. I eat it. If I'm in my
Yes.
office, she'll
And
drop
the
off
right
my lunch.
portion and the
Yeah.
right portion of food.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cause I think that was
totally.
something that was tough for me in the past, was like trying to have variety. So I actually really like you just eat the same thing every day for
Yeah.
that like predictability, to where
Yep.
like if something's not working, we now have isolated variables to attack. So
100%.
yeah, I've enjoyed it as well. So yeah,
So
okay.
yeah, we tangent, but yeah, buy back your time.
I would say Buy Back Your Time is for sure one of those books that I think is life changing. And I always recommend it to anybody with an EA. Like, not only you, but have your EA read it. So like for me, I had my EA read it before she started, because it just
Mm,
creates common language, and there's so many
mm,
useful like tools. I always recommend the hard copy. I tell people like the first half of the book is theory, convincing you why this is a good idea, and the second half is much more like tactical. Like it's like, man, here's how to do this.
yeah,
Have you
literally,
mapped out
I
your
love
perfect
that.
week? Have you
Mm-hmm.
mapped out
Yes.
like a 1-3-1? Do you have that language? So now with my EA, we'll even say like, hey, let's 10-80-10 this. And she immediately knows what I'm talking about, and we can just go right into it. Or I'll say like, hey, give me a 1-3-1 on that, and let's talk about it tomorrow. And like it makes communication so streamlined. And I see that with teams too. It's one of the biggest tools I implement with teams is a 1-3-1, because in both directions it helps speed up communication.
And
And
that's the state the problem, come up with 3 ideas, and give your recommendation.
yep, because what it does is it forces people to be creative. One, it forces us to address what's the problem we're trying to solve. The three solutions forces you to be creative, because if you're stuck in a black and white, you're usually in like a triggered state, right? You're not using your prefrontal cortex, you're back in your amygdala, where you're like, it's either this or it's this, right? It's all or nothing. And so by forcing somebody to come up with three scenarios, you know that they're being creative, right? So now they're not just focused on what's the
Identify.
real problem, but now they're
Yep.
going, how do I shift into solutions? So you're getting people to be solution oriented. And then once they shift to a solution, it's getting them to practice making decisions, because they're going, this is the one that I would do. And then you get to like come alongside and coach them before they actually execute that thing.
Yep.
So
It's
it's a
brilliant.
game changer, speeds up conversations. Buy Back Your Time, I would say, is one. Um, I recently reread 10x is easier than 2x. And
Mm.
the reason I love that one is because it touches on the who, not how concept. It touches on the gap and the gain. And I think those are both incredible. And so 10x easier than 2x feels like a nice little culmination of a lot of Dan Sullivan's like best topics.
Yep.
So I think that's a great one. And then I would probably say Green Lights
Ooh,
by
Matthew
Matthew
McConaughey.
McConaughey, and specifically the Audible, because him
I've
reading it
heard that
is
too. I haven't
just
read
such a
it, but
game changer. Oh man,
yeah.
I have never listened to an Audible book so quickly. I think I finished it in like a day, day and a half. It
Mm.
is so good. Just hearing him talk about his story and his awareness and all these situations he went through, and almost like this, like it almost reminds me of the book like Father. Is it Fathered by God? Where it's just kind of this like journey of manhood that he went through, and all these like lessons learned, right? In this reflection
Mm.
time. But yeah, that's a great one, I would say.
That's awesome. Movie suggestion.
Could I do TV show?
Sure.
I would say Ted Lasso.
Oh,
Ted
I only
Lasso.
watched season 1. It was fantastic. I haven't. Did you watch the second, or is
Yeah,
there more
yeah.
than 2 now?
Yeah, season 2 was good. Season 3 redeemed itself. The first
Okay.
like 3/4 of season 3 is trash, but the last like 2 episodes totally redeems itself, in my opinion. But that's one of those ones that I feel like it's just like, man, they don't make shows like this. This is it's funny. There's like character qualities, just the whole story and narrative. Yeah, that's probably one of my favorites that I rewatch sometimes.
That's awesome. And if people want to get in touch, what's your recommended method of contact?
Easiest thing is probably just Instagram, the Rev Ops coach. I check that fairly frequently. I have my team check it as well. So that's usually the easiest, or you can go to our website, therevopscoach.com, and that links to everything that I do, whether it's coaching, consulting, REI Boss, Ops Academy. You can get to everything from there.
Awesome. Any other closing remarks, thoughts? I always like to pause and say, was there anything that is on your mind you came to today? Like, oh, when I always talk about whatever, any just wrap up thoughts?
I don't think so, man. You asked great questions. I feel like we kind of covered all the bases.
Sweet. Well, Ian, this was fun. Thank you again. And I told Levi the Maui thing, I'm coaching basketball this year.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, I probably will be in the future as well. So, I mean, going to Hawaii in the winter is fantastic. But I was like, if it was in like March, my wife and I done. Like, let's go. So hopefully there's more
I'll talk
of
to
those.
Levi. Maybe we'll do another one in the spring or in March.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ian. We'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much for listening. My name is Chris Kiefer, and my mission is to champion the relentless pursuit of purpose. And what that means to me is to be an example, a champion, someone that is in the trenches, working and showing and winning and trying and failing in how to pursue a deeper and more meaningful life with the people that I love, with my kids, with my friends, with our family, and also just be a champion and example of entrepreneurship and following my passion and doing what I believe I'm called to on this earth. And so if that inspires you in some way, please share this episode. If you want, like, subscribe, share, whatever, do all the stuff. It means the world to me to get this message and get these guests that I have out there. And if you're interested in any of the book recommendations or looking up other episodes, the movie list, you can visit my website, chriskiefer.com, for all the details on the show. And also check out the Boolean review software, as well as the Boolean automation consulting company that I own for home service businesses. So thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.